Hey guys, it's Steph Sanity. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk all about paint pens. I'm going to go through some different brands, share my thoughts and recommendations on the paint pens that I own, and I do have a lot of experience with these products. I'll be sure to link them down below if you want to check them out for yourself. But before we get started, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can join me in future videos. Okay, so for starters, we're going to talk about Sharpie paint pens, and these are oil-based, and for that reason, I really like them. I prefer oil over the water-based, and I have two different sizes here. I have the medium point and also the extra fine. I do like both of them for different reasons. You can see the tips really well in this frame right here. As for the price, it really varies depending on where you get them from. I prefer to get mine in packs from Amazon because I just save more that way. Plus, I go through a lot of them. So if you want to test them out, maybe stop by Michael's with a coupon if you have a Michael's store near you and just see if you like them before you buy them in bulk like that. But here I'm just showing you swatches. These are both a metallic finish, which I'm super fond of, especially for accent colors or accents in my writing. I'm just covering the basics here in this intro, but I will go over more in depth with the pros and cons later in the video when I actually use them for lettering. But before we get into that, I do want to show you a close-up of the pens and the colors. These are the colors that I would recommend. It just gives you the most variety, but they do offer a little bit more vibrant colors as well, which I tend to stay away from just from my preference. Overall, I do want to warn you, these can be frustrating to work with, but they are well worth it. These have to be my favorite just because they're the smoothest and easiest oil-based paint pens that I have used, and I can't stop going back to them. Moving on to the next type, these are the Unep Pasca paint pens, and I do really like these. These are the only colors that I have. These do have a pretty fine tip, as you can see, compared to the extra fine point of the Sharpie paint pen. These are water-based, and I would say they're more affordable than the Sharpie paint pens. As you can see at the close-up of the swatch, they are really opaque. Definitely a staple for anyone who wants to try out paint pens. And then last but not least, well, maybe a little least because these are my least favorite, but I work with them anyway because number one, they're oil-based. Two, they have a bunch of colors in this pack that I got. It's a 15-piece set, and they're by PaintMark Paint Marker. I'm not really entirely sure of the brand. I saw they had good reviews on Amazon, so I decided to try them out. They do have a no-fade guarantee, and I do like the colors, but these are super frustrating to work with. As you can see in the swatch, these aren't opaque at all. You have to go over your writing a bunch of times and really work with these. The tip just does not get saturated in the paint, and it does have a more rounded tip as opposed to the other ones that have a more pointed tip. When it comes to products that I sell, I actually stay away from these paint pens just because they're very unreliable. I would not recommend, especially if you're a beginner. And this one should be in its own category. This is a liquid chrome marker by, I believe it's pronounced Molotow. They make other paint pens, which I'm dying to try out. It's like liquid metal. When you put it on paper, it's crazy. It is nice to have, but it's outrageously expensive, and I just don't reach for it. I think it's a little tricky to work with, to be honest. But this marker is really cool if you want to try out something different for accents, if you just want that liquid metal look, but I just don't find it too appealing in my work. Okay, so here's some lettering that I did previously, and this is what inspired me to make this video. I did post this on Instagram, so if you follow me on there, then you would have already seen this. I am going to work on the other boot just to have a clean slate for you guys today. I'm going to be doing a little bit of lettering as I discuss the pros and cons and show you these paint pens in action. If you are unfamiliar with paint pens and never used them before, make sure you read the instructions. The instructions will tell you to shake the paint pen and also press it on a surface just to get the paint started to flow through the tip, and that's what I'm doing here. You do have to do that every once in a while, but once it starts flowing, it does do so for a long period of time. You don't have to repeat the process every single time you pick up the pen. I know some paint pens you can buy replacement cartridges to put inside of them so you can keep the pen, and it's a little bit cheaper that way. I've never done that. I just replace the whole pen. It might be a little bit wasteful, but that's just what I tend to do. Now to explain a little bit of what I'm doing, I wanted to keep most of this in real time just so you can see I do spend a lot of time on each letter just to make the opacity really even across the lettering, because once it does dry, it's difficult to go over with the same pen because you can kind of pick up the paint and disrupt it, and if that happens, you do want to dab over top of the gaps to delicately disperse the paint into those areas, if that makes sense. If you don't know what I mean, you'll know what I mean as soon as you start using these, because you'll come across that issue. And then once I have the lettering down and I filled up the space the way that I want it to without leaving any gaps or having any of the letters off center, then I will go back and darken the downstroke strokes just to give it a little bit more of that brush lettered effect. Now, if I'm really worried about the paint staying on these boots and the lettering holding up, I would use the Sharpies for everything, but I do want to make it pop a little bit more, make it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to jazz it up with some other paint pens. But before I do that, I'm going in with the extra fine tip metallic gold Sharpie pen, and I'm writing the next word right underneath that first one. And as promised, I'll specify the pros and the cons with these markers. The only con that I have, I like everything else except this one thing, they're super inconsistent. This paint pen is way more saturated and opaque than the first paint pen that I used. You can tell in the close-up here that that one is beautiful, but the problem is once in a while, it will just flood out some paint. So definitely have a notepad or a piece of scrap paper handy so you can clean that up if that happens, and you just have to be really careful. The larger paint pens, I have not come across that problem though. So if that was confusing, I'm basically saying either you have the paint being a little on the dry side or you have it flooding out of the marker. It is inconsistent. Now these Posca paint pens, they are super bright and pigmented, as you can see. The only con is the fact that it's water-based and it doesn't hold up quite as well as the oil-based markers. Also, the point is a little bit more sharp, so it does tend to grab on surfaces a little bit easier. If you look closely, you can see what I mean. It kind of spatters the paint and I have to thicken the lines just to cover it up. That happens to me on the journals that I sell as well when I'm using these. So it's not just because of the material of these boots. But overall, I highly recommend these as a first choice if you just are going to letter for fun. You can always trust them to work, and I do think they last a little bit longer than the Sharpie ones as well. I'm adding a little bit of the Molotow liquid chrome marker just so you can see the effect mixed in with the other markers. As you can see, it doesn't blend very well and it just doesn't fit with the look of the others, but you can definitely use them in different ways. I just don't recommend them for lettering if that's what you're looking for. And then going in with the other oil-based markers, the paint markers, I guess. I'm just adding a little bit of details in with the lettering, just some shadows and highlights. If you look at the other boot that I worked on, I used these a lot more just to experiment with the colors, but I did, like I said, I had to work with them a little bit too much, and I wouldn't recommend them for doing a whole word, but I would recommend them for doing little accents that you want to stay layered on top of other paint pens or other works. I want to add a little bit more detailing, some shadows with the black because I haven't used black yet. I'm using the Pasca paint pen for this. I am using that one just because it's thin. The Sharpie one that I have is too thick to go in and do some shadows with, especially when there's not much spacing between the letters. Alright, I think I went over all the points that I wanted to discuss. I'm going to show you a couple more quotes handwritten in different styles just to show you some more of the paint pens in action. If I left anything out or if you're curious about anything, leave it below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll see you guys in my next one.